Fast Yearly Podcast presents the Tome Travelers.
Well, hi, and welcome back. This is John with Passion Nerd League here for Tome Travelers, and today I have a special guest on the show. I am here today with Ed Healy.
Who's that?
That'd be you.
Who's Ed Healy? It's nice to talk to you finally, John.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. It's good to have you on the show today. This is going to be an interesting show because we're going to move into some more diverse areas with gaming, I feel, because you've worked in gaming companies yourself, but you're more now in kind of a troubleshooting business from the way things seem.
Yeah, we're mostly B2B, helping publishers, but that's just a feature of me kind of coming to terms being more self-aware with kind of what I like to do as opposed to what I'm good at. So yeah, I mean, I would love to be a world-renowned game designer, but the truth is I'm just much better at helping other people who are better at designing. So I just focus on what I do well, and it gives me joy, and it's better than having a, quote, real day job. So
I definitely can understand that. Warm-up question that I always do with any guests I have on the show is pretty much asking, so what was your first gaming experience with RPGs?
RPGs would be the Boy Scouts. So I can actually remember the very first day I played a role-playing game. It was at a camping trip with the Boy Scouts, and we had just finished playing Capture the Flag, and one of the guys had some D&D books, so connected with him and thought it was cool. My mom actually bought me the Frank Mentzer 83, I think, or 86, the red box D&D set.
Oh, wow.
And so my first experience where it was like me playing instead of just kind of being introduced was my mom was my DM. And quickly she said, I need to go get friends because you don't want to play with me as much as I wanted to play. So Frank Mentzer is probably more to do with me being a gamer today than anything else.
Danielle Delisle, who's a writer for Third Eye Games, her introduction as well was D&D getting the red box set. And for her, though, it was 10 years later. Her grandmother picked it up for her at a garage sale. I always love hearing people talk about the red box. And, of course, right now the new red box has come out from D&D that is Stranger Things based. So it's going to be interesting also to see in the future more people saying, oh, I got into D&D with the red box. So
which one?
Exactly.
right. I mean, honestly, man. I mean, you've seen the one that I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you've touched it. Or it's almost a perfect product, right? Like it's so amazing. It's so hard for people to do better than that. It just was well thought out, well executed. I wish it was Ed Healy's red box, but you know what? Oh, yeah. Frank did a phenomenal job, and I'm so grateful that he did.
It really has inspired a whole line of products nowadays. I mean, just last week, we had the announcement that went out from Catalyst Game Lab saying that they're going to do their 6th edition Shadowrun beginner box set. And that's going to be a product they're hoping to have out by Gen Con.
I think the BattleTech one that they did a couple of years ago is done well for them. So that totally makes sense that they would do one for Shadowrun.
Yeah. But so, first gaming experience aside, you also did start with game publishing a little bit. People may be familiar a little bit with the company that you started with, which was Eden Studios.
Yeah.
I was actually in a game store earlier today, and I saw that they had a Buffy the Vampire Slayer book on the shelf. And so there's been a lot of books that came out from them, or a great deal more books that came out from them. But about where did you kind of start off with them?
So I went overseas. My parents were missionaries in Europe when I was in college, and so I took time off and hung out with them for a little while, mostly to court my future wife. And this was in the mid-'90s. And when I came back, Mozilla had launched the Netscape Navigator. So I'm sitting in business school, and I'm trying to type up a report. And the guy next to me has a computer on, and it has pretty pictures and whatnot. I'm like, what's that? He said, it's the internet, right? And I was like, that's not the internet. The internet is where I play Zork and download tabs from my guitar. And sure enough, I went on Alta Vista. First thing I typed in was Dungeons and Dragons, of course, and ended up at Tracy Hickman's homepage.
Oh, wow.
He was doing a project with Margaret Weiss. He had all sorts of cool Dragonlance stuff on his site, which was phenomenal. But he was doing this thing called Star Shield. It was a shared world thing. And so they would do novels, but they also had this shared world thing where if you created an empire or a nation or whatever and they liked what you did, they put you in the books, which was neat.
Oh, wow.
And alongside that, they had a company called New Millennium Entertainment that was doing the tabletop role-playing game iteration of Starshield. And I was talking with Bernie Trombley, who was the president of the company, over, I want to say it's like the mid-90s version of GUI chat. I mean, it was basically IRC with happy Fred faces floating around. I mean, it was, I forget what it's called, but yeah, it was the 90s. Anyways, he mentioned this place called Plotter Kill. That's in Schenectady, New York. Where are you? Turns out Bernie had his office in the back room of my local game store, which was run by George Vasilakos, who went to my high school. So I just decided I was going to go in there and kind of see what's what. And I ended up, me and this guy, Frank Torkel, became the unofficial, official playtesters for the Starshield role-playing game. We actually contributed some stuff, but largely we're just there kind of geeking out. By talking to the guys, I found out New Millennium wasn't doing too well business-wise. They had done the Battle Lords of the 23rd Century CCG, and this is before POD, this is before PDFs, this is before everything. And so to do a game, to print something, you just had to print it. There was no Kickstarter, there was none of that. Needless to say, they were leveraged poorly. They had a lot of debt, and it looked like some of the properties that were going to be gone after by the bank to satisfy that debt included George's house. I didn't want my local game store to go away. I didn't want my, a guy that painted the logo of our school on the wall. Like he was just this phenomenal artist that I didn't want him out on the streets. So I had this idea. Well, why don't you trade the debt on your house for the Conspiracy X game, which was selling really well. It sold like 10,000 copies in the first 3 months. It was doing really well. Deadlands had just come out too, also doing very well. That way, at least you're fighting for your house. Yeah. Either way, you're gonna have to pay that debt. It'd be better to be able to do something with it. And so they did. And so we needed a new company. And so Alex Yerkit and I put in some money, and we called it Eden Studios. And the first thing we published was expansions for the Conspiracy X role-playing game, and then republished it and then expanded it. And then we did All Flesh Must Be Eaten, the Abduction card game, a number of different – we even did a video game called Iron Dragons or something. I don't know. It was based on one of those railroading games. Then I left the company, and what we did – what was it? It was Witchcraft and Armageddon was in there somewhere too. And right as I was leaving, they got the license for Buffy and Angel. So I was not involved in that at all.
Yeah. All right. For a while there, Eden really was knocking out of the park. Those were some great titles. And, of course, Witchcraft. Witchcraft is – I really like the way the book looks and the artwork within the book. It is a stellar product.
I would say that and Armageddon are probably visually my favorites. Some of the supplements, like Visitations for Conspiracy X, is also really phenomenal. When you mix Chris Schei's art with George Vasilakos' ability to do graphic design, you get magic, right? Like there's just no competing with that. I mean, there is competing with that, but it's very difficult to compete with that. There's some stuff that George had made for Conspiracy X that I don't think ever saw the light of day. It would just blow your mind. It was so beautiful.
It kind of brings up this entire thing that we're in a really interesting time period with tabletop role-playing games where the market is kind of changing and it's maturing, and this title is appearing out everywhere. But at the same time, there are guys like me and shows like the Vintage RPG podcasts and their channels, Law Dog on Twitter. And there's this whole movement now, kind of a look back at old RPG titles. And I'm just curious, I mean, is there a title that you look back and you're like, man, I wonder what happened to that? Or that is a title that really stands out for you?
So when you talk about vintage, I always think about my first convention. There was a couple guys living in the DC area, actually in Annapolis, and they were doing this thing called Apartment Con, which was what it sounds like, a convention at their apartment. And a friend of mine drove in from Ohio, picked me up in New Jersey, and we drove down, picking up people in Jersey along the way. And I got to play a bunch of stuff I'd never even heard of, like Maelstrom role-playing from Nova, or I think it's Hubris Games, yeah. And this is right when 3rd edition hadn't even come out yet. It was about to come out. There was a game I picked up called Providence by XID Creative, which I don't know if anybody's ever played, but I have like all 20 of the books still sitting in the other room that I would love to play again. But there's all sorts of vintage stuff. Little Fears came out, and this is before I started the Forge, so it was like this is before 3rd edition killed that aspect of gaming too, right? So there's just a lot of really cool, interesting house systems and stuff. I mean, we had the Unisystem at Eden, so we kind of had our own system, but, and what became Savage Worlds was Deadlands and whatnot. But there was a lot of kooky little systems out there that had some really interesting stuff, and it was always fun to see what those things were. Now you've got Kickstarter, you can get a hold of these, but back then it was just like random stuff going in your game store. I treated it like going to Barnes and Noble. I just take the book off the shelf, look at it, thumb through it a little bit, and go, I can afford $20, and just try it,
We find the weird and esoteric stuff.
Cool.
But one of the things that come out of all this is now we've also got this entire new future of gaming going on as well, and just the community, the way it's evolved. Your participation in it. You mentioned The Forge. You also were involved in Kobold Quarterly, and now you're in Gamerati. You've developed a reputation. I mean, I've had a couple Kickstarter books and other things that have come to me that have been tied to the Gamerati. And you've got a reputation as the guy that people go to. So I was wondering if you could give us a little insight into like that passion for the service side of the gaming industry and how it got started.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning when we started talking. A long time ago, I did the whole bucket list thing. Like, I'd like to go see the pyramids before I die. And one of the things that I wanted to do was walk into a Barnes and Noble and see a novel with my name on the spine. I thought that would be awesome. Then I started writing, and I wrote for Ancient Warfare magazine, paintball magazines, and I just really, honestly, I discovered that if I cared about the topic, I hated writing. It was torture for me, probably because I cared too much, right? But what I found is that I really like helping people. So whether it's you saying, hey, I'd really like to talk to Tracy Hickman someday, and me saying, well, I got a cell phone. You want to talk to him? Like that kind of thing, right? I like doing that. What gives me joy is helping people. And so when I was getting ready for my first tour in Iraq, Wolf Bauer had started his open design projects. This was before Kickstarter, right? Basically patronage projects. Think Patreon, guys. Mm-hmm. But he was doing it off his blog. And he had done Steel and Brass or something. And this next project he announced was called Castle Shadowcrag. And I was running and have been running for the last 20 years now a Plane of Shadows campaign. So any additional Plane of Shadows information was phenomenal. And so I patronized his project. And then he had another one for Kobold Quarterly while I was deployed. And so I patronized that. And he wrote me an email and said, where do you want me to send this? Deployed. And I said, well, how about you don't send it to me? How about you hold on to it because I don't want it to get ruined, Mm-hmm. But that opened up a conversation. So when I got this second issue, I got the PDF. I looked at it and I noticed it was like no advertising. And so I just wrote him and said, hey, what are you doing for advertising? And he said, I'm just kind of giving it away to people I like. Kobold Ate My Baby or whatever. I said, well, do you want any help? I don't know anything about making magazines, but I know that advertising probably helps you pay for them, right? So from Iraq on Skype, I got a hold of Chris Pramus at Green Ronin and George over at Eden Studios and some other people and got him some advertising. He offered me a beer and I asked him for a job instead.
That's awesome.
So I basically started Gamerati as a way to help Wolf with things that he needed. But that's no different than me starting Eden Studios to help George keep his house or starting The Forge to encourage Ron to publish the Sorcerer role-playing game. Or, I mean, honestly, like if you just look at the throughput through all those things, I just like helping. So I get my joy out. I mean, I like playing games too, but from the business side, I get the most joy out of being able to have somebody have something cool and creative and me going, that's neat. I think more people need to know about that, and then helping them find more people. So anything else that we do, people, if if you were a publisher, you say, what I could really use is my antenna go up, and I'm like trying to figure out what that is.
Would you say that your time in the military, did any of the skills that you learned there kind of aid any of this?
Not really.
Not really? Because
no, I don't think so.
I didn't know if maybe you were involved in any procurement or anything like that.
Well, I was trained as a secure radio mechanic, essentially fixing radios so people can't listen in on our conversations. But practically what I did was drive a truck. No, I wouldn't say truck driving was necessarily. I mean, I will say that the only thing that military did do is I used to be really into playing paintball, but now I'm not terribly interested in it. But other than that, I would say no, not really. But I mean, I'm sure there's perspectives I have that help. Probably working as a CPA, auditing financial statements has helped me in the business side a lot more than anything else because you have to pay for stuff. So
I'm just always curious about that because I've known so many men and women who have served and gone on to something involving role play, which I always love. Rudy Rutenberg is also former military. I used to have some friends in the 97th. They had famous pictures on their Facebook blog of role playing on top of a hotel in Baghdad.
Yeah, I mean, we gamed. They had a thing called ZeratoCon deployed, and it was a slapped together game convention in Baghdad, which was kind of fun. There was this website. I guess it would maybe influence certain things, but I wouldn't say that it was necessarily the way you asked the question. So there's things that I've done because of things that I experienced. So when I was deployed, they had a website, and it was just a forum where somebody would say, hey, I've got the DVDs for the third season of The Sopranos. Does anybody want them? Or, hey, I've got, the Dragonlance Chronicles. Does anybody want them? But you could also say, these are the things that I would like, and people would just send them to you.
That's awesome.
And I thought, man, we need to have Games for Troops. So I have the Games for Troops URL that I'll eventually do something with, but I haven't figured out how to do anything with it yet. Because it would be cool to have a thing for us to be able to support troops. Yeah, but that's more based on my experience, having really enjoyed the ability to – because honestly, if somebody sends something to USO, as soon as it's into one of the libraries, it disappears because, you're a gamer. If somebody sent like an entire collection of Space Marines for GW, they wouldn't survive. Somebody would take those things home. Yeah. So yeah, having a way for people to connect that would have been pretty cool. And so someday I'll do it. I've got the website. I just haven't done anything with it yet.
So talking about all this with service and gaming and everything else, so has there been kind of like a particular high point or a moment for you with Gamerati where you felt like, okay, this is it, and you kind of like had struck gold with the idea of what you were doing?
This is going to be a weird answer, I think. I don't know business-wise if this is true, but I have one. But emotionally, I would say I was at Gen Con a few years ago helping, I think it was at the Green Ronin booth, and Steve Russell from Wright Publishing came up to the booth, and at the time, his mom or dad had been having health problems. I had known this somehow because we had exchanged messages. So I just asked him about his parents. And he actually took the time to say, that meant a lot to me because you took the time to ask after you actually know who I am. And that kind of like being able to connect with people emotionally, I think, is where I get the most juice for the squeeze. Business-wise, we've had a lot of cool things happen, but for me, that's just a catalyst for connection. So it's kind of like games. If you think about it, games are kind of worthless if you think about it all by themselves. They don't really have any value. They're just cardboard and metal and plastic. And what gives them value is that they let you and I sit across the table and play, or they let us talk over the internet about this shared experience that we have. They're the glue that holds the community together. That's what sports is. That's what church is. That's what, the PTA is. And so for me, the gaming, the business side of it or whatever is secondary to the people, the connection. So I would say, and unfortunately, Steve's no longer with us. I don't know if you know who Steve is. He got killed by a drunk driver a few years back. He was a really cool guy. But I would say as far as moments that stand out that influence what I do now, Steve taking the time to come up to the booth and then us just having a conversation about his life was more impactful for me looking back than any of the business decisions that we made. There's no game or book or whatever that is as valuable as that, to me.
That's very true. And I mean, with the community, it's like I've always said, the games are just the vehicles. It's the destination, it's the time together, it's the vehicle that gets you there. So
I mean, the truth is, I still play D&D on Skype with the guys that I played second edition D&D with when I lived in New Jersey 20-something years ago. Like Sunday evenings, I would go over to this guy Mitch's house and we would game all night, and we still game Sunday nights. But I just, I don't live in Jersey, so I do it over Skype. But so I get to keep my friends. But it's about the friendship. It's about the people.
I just want to toss out a little shout out myself to the Vintage RPG program, which actually is recorded in Jersey.
Do you know if they go to PAX Unplugged? It would be cool to connect with them.
Yeah, I believe that they do. But the big thing that Stu is into is actually wrestling. And he travels all over America to go and watch all the different wrestling gigs everywhere. I mean, if it's a major like pay-per-view event, he's usually there. Whether it's
as a fan or is he working?
Oh, as a fan. Like whether it's WWE or Ring of Honor or anything else, he's there.
That was me with the Grateful Dead back in the day.
Yeah.
That's funny. I should ask you this because you're in Texas. Are you going to be at DreamHack Dallas? at the end of the month.
I was unaware of that one. No, right now, Comicpalooza is our big one, and then depending on work-related issues, I will be at Gen Con.
Well, I will be in Dallas May 31st to June 2nd because they have an indie tabletop game spotlight. And they say indie, whatever. They're just basically saying tabletop game spotlight. And we submitted a bunch of games that I'm working on, and 4 of them got accepted. So I'll have 4 upcoming or presently kickstarting or whatever products at DreamHack Dallas. So I'm going to be there with my video guy and everything. So if you're free and want to pop in, it would be cool to hang out.
I would love to. I'll see if I can make some arrangements. I'd love to be there. Cool. So I'm always looking for more conventions to go and see. So
nice.
All these things aside, and especially with Gamerati, so let's go ahead and just touch on that. So what is it that Gamerati does? There's
basically 3 things that we do. We manage marketing for people. We do a little bit. We have like a standard package that companies like Onyx Path or Crafty or any of the Evil Hat Productions, that we do a little bit of marketing, a little bit of advertising, a little bit of media outreach, a little bit of social media, email, stuff like that. But marketing essentially. And some companies will come in and say, hey, can you do more than that? And so, for instance, the video game version of Sentinels of the Multiverse and the Sentinels role-playing game is coming out in July, and we're doing the marketing for that. And so people will come in and just say, hey, we don't have time or energy or experience, but we need this. Can you help us? As an extension of that, we do crowdfunding. So we've helped raise over $73 million for our clients on Kickstarter and whatnot. So we'll do everything from we'll manage the entire project soup to nuts if they need us to. And then kind of as an extension of that, we have a warehouse and we have people that put stuff in boxes and slap stamps on it effectively and send it out. So logistics is the third thing we do. We don't publish anything, but if you publish a game, we can pretty much do everything else.
Do you have contact with publishers if people are looking for that when they are going through that whole Kickstarter route, or is that something that's on them? Okay, so you do have that kind of contact information. That's cool.
Yeah, best case scenario for me, I just actually talked to a guy who has he's a retailer who has a product he's thinking about offering to retailers to kind of help them monetize their actual play experiences in their store. And I asked him, when is he thinking about he wants to have this? He's like 15 months from now. I'm like, great. Because for me, being involved in the process of refining the product and documenting the processing and, working on the project ahead of time, pre-promoting, is so much better than somebody that comes to me and says, hey, I'm launching my Kickstarter in 2 days. Can you help?
Oh, yeah.
There's a very big difference in the amount of help I can give, right? Oh, so the sooner. So I've been talking to Ronan Liu about Grimmer Space for almost 2 years. Like we were hoping to start talking about it at Gen Con 2017. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they're working with Sean Astin.
Oh yeah,
it's a Starfinder thing. Yeah,
YouTube video with Sean was wonderful, and they keep on. They're doing really good with their media presence on Facebook recently. It keeps popping up for me.
Thank you.
Excellent. that's you guys, huh?
That's us. There we go. Yeah, no, so being involved in that for 2 years before we're actually doing the project has been immensely valuable. One of the games you may see when you're at DreamHack Dallas, if I can convince you to go, is by a guy who lives in Texas. It's a board game. You're basically pirates. And we've been helping with play testing and stuff. And that's valuable too, because, you can never have too many editors, right? Especially with a role-playing game. And honestly, you can't edit your own stuff. And the same thing goes with play testing. You really can't play test your own adventure because what you wrote down isn't necessarily how you run it. And so you don't realize that you're taking shortcuts. It's always good to kind of have somebody blind test that stuff for you. And so the more time you have, the more experience other people can have with your product, and then they can make it better. Again, back to community, right? Like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Those connections. Yeah, and then everybody's better for it because a better game, a better adventure, a better whatever means that everyone's going to have a better time.
Oh so,
yeah. I would say the more I talk to publishers, probably. Jeepers, we have I have a list here. We have 43 clients. So I have to talk to them at least once a month or once a week, each of them. And then, my video guy does stuff, and Joey, my logistics guy, does mostly logistics. And I have a project manager that runs projects. And so we have probably 20 or 30 other ones that are either actively asking us questions or we're trying to get them to sign a contract. So,
nice. Wow. So yeah, very, very active. So it's not just them coming to you. You're actively looking for clients.
Well, I don't actually go out and propose it to people. We've been around long enough and have enough connections that largely people come to us.
Okay.
A lot of times it comes like this. For instance, I don't know if you've seen the Game Biz videos that we put out, where we just show people what it's like to run a business. And a lot of times people say, "Oh, I thought that was pretty cool what you did with Creative Game Studios, or that conversation you had with Steve over at Sasquatch Games." I'm like, "Yeah, cool." And they're like, "Will you help me?" I'm like, "I will be happy to help you." Or we actually run all the ads on EN World and RPG.net and stuff like that.
Nice.
So a lot of times people come to us and say, "Hey, we want to advertise on EN World." And that becomes a conversation at that point. Well, we can do more than advertising if you really want it. And a lot of times they'll say, well, let's just do advertising. And then they have another project that's further out that they want us to answer questions about. But generally the trajectory is somebody comes to us for ads or for fulfillment or something. And then we just do well by them. And then over time we do more. So we have a couple clients, like Crafty Games is a good example, that we do everything. We just do literally everything for them except for make their game.
Yeah, I've recently... Thanks to Ed and Gamerati, we had the interview with Patrick Capera, and absolutely
He's so
wonderful.
good at giving interviews.
Yeah, no, I loved having him on the show and just talking to him. It was like, honestly, kind of a dream come true for me.
You're a Spycraft fan, aren't you?
I am an absolute Spycraft fan for Classic Edition, and we geeked out together.
Cool. You'd be happy to know that I have most of the system edition sitting on my hard drive right now.
It was neat. And also, I've worked in publishing a little bit. I worked in game layout, and my wife has worked in game layout and professional book layout. And so it was kind of neat also talking to him about the little things, like the small little minutia of some of his books. And I was like, that's so neat to find out. I had no idea, and I don't know if anybody's ever asked him that before, but it was so much fun. So I appreciate having him on the show, and so I love
that. Honestly, that's the kind of thing I geek out the most about. It's so weird that the minutia stuff is what I find the most interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why I think the Red Box thing was so interesting to me, because not only was it my introduction, but it's talk to people about designing their role-playing books. And, I give them my opinion, of course, but, there is a method to the madness. There is a structure that, unless that people don't realize that there's a right way and a wrong way to make a role-play.
Oh, yeah. No, I think there's a certain amount of, actually a great amount of disconnect for general public when it comes to game publishing, because people are always like, well, if it's a good game, you're just going to put out a good game. And I'm like, no, you have no idea. You have no idea the processes, amount of work that goes into it, the training. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's game mechanic wise, but I'm talking about the physical structure of what chapter to put. Even that stuff is important. And using it, I don't realize how my car works. I just want to work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
no. Our show, going through different books and products, there are books that you can see a difference in the way it's laid out and whether or not it works for the general public, if they can understand and follow it.
So if you were going to do a game, let's say you were doing Smurfs and Mechs, right? Smechs, the role-playing game. What would be the first thing in your first chapter? What would you give? Let's assume that you've already done the 2-page introduction that tells people what Smechs is, generically, but where would you start?
For me, people might disagree with me a little bit, but I like to kind of jump into character creation and the things that a general player needs to know. Thank
you. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I don't understand why people get 60 pages of world history or 20 pages.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things
the right thing to put at the beginning.
One of the books that I worked on, and I think it's safe for me to talk about it. I worked for Dark Skull Studios with their New Gods of Mankind line, and it had.
I also worked for them.
Oh, okay. I have to ask. You did a game tour, right?
I did. You guys were a sponsor, and I went to GDC.
Yeah, and we
hung out. Yeah,
you came to Ironbeard Games in Houston, didn't you?
I think I might have. I have a list of locations. It's been 7 years or 8 years.
I just realized our paths have crossed.
Have we met?
We have not. We have not met. I did not make that. I did not make that time there. But I was at. If you went to dinner that night at a steakhouse with the rest of the group from that, I was there for that.
Then we've met.
Oh my gosh!
I was. By the time I got to Texas, I was the only person running the tour. So
okay. Well, hi.
Yeah. Hello again. I went to Little Wars of Houston as well.
Yeah.
I think we went to Dragon's Lair. Yeah, we went to a number of stores in the Texas orbit. I mean, Texas is a big state, so it's kind of hard. I didn't go to Magnolia or Mongolia or whatever. I didn't go all the way down to the tip. But my mom's from Houston, outside Houston originally. She's from Tomball. So
that's where I live
spent
now.
A little more time in Tomball.
I live in Tomball, so I moved.
Okay, that's hilarious. I spent every summer like oil derricks, sidewinder snakes, fire ants, the whole 9 yards. Like, yeah, dude. Yeah. So this has become the Tomball podcast. There we go.
All of a sudden, there you are. Yeah. Speaking of which, this one I like to toss out because you're not new to podcasting at all yourself.
No.
Yeah, you actually have a pretty good podcast, pretty famous podcast name under your belt with Atomic Array, and y'all won a gold Emmy.
Yep, 2010.
Yeah. So are you still going on with podcasting, or what are you up to these days with that?
I don't personally do one. I do want to do one. I have long wanted to do a business-related one for the industry, and I probably will. Me and my video guy have been talking about doing one called Game Flicks, which is just analyzing movies and TV shows and how they can adopt them into games, which I think we might try to do. Two of the guys that work with me do a podcast called The Curators, which we're the only curated page that is game specific on Kickstarter. So we do a show called The Curators, and Joey and Marcelo talk about what they think are cool games, and that may end up being in the next couple of weeks. We may start doing that as a video podcast as well. So recording it on video. There's tons of different types of podcasts I would like to do. Back when me and Roan were doing them, we had Atomic Array, which was our kind of showcase of a game. Mm-hmm. We had RPG Countdown, which was, Casey Kasem meets role-playing games.
Yeah.
We even hammed it up. And then for a time, we did the Open Design podcast, which probably was our most popular one, even though it was a flash in the pan. We did that with Wolf Bauer for Open Design before he became Cobalt Press, and I really liked doing that one. It was too bad we only got like 8 episodes. So
yeah,
my very first experience with podcasting was The Writers or something like that. I did it from Bulgaria when I was living there, 2000 something or 1997. And there was a woman who was an author in England, and we just did it over Skype. We did one episode, and that was the last time. It was so terrible. But we were talking about doing a podcast. But as podcasts go, we did one episode, and that was it. We pod faded after one episode, and then Ron and I did Atomic Array, so that obviously was a little more popular.
Yeah, just wanted to get that out there because I love talking to other podcasters and. I have a weird audience, nothing personal towards my audience, but here locally, a lot of my audience, we are actually one of their first podcasts that they've ever listened to. And I really want them to understand how much more is out there beyond us. Just go on iTunes. Oh, yeah. And so I would love for people to just go out there and realize there are all sorts of great podcasting sites for RPGs and actual plays. I know that at RPGcasts.com right now, there are over 300 actual plays listed. So there's so many great podcasts out there. But
I actually have a D&Dcast.com, and I was hoping to do a D&D podcast at some point, but until I can carve enough time out of my weekly schedule, I'm not going to do anything with it. But yeah.
Nice.
Someday.
Well, other things kind of jumped around a lot on topics, but I was wondering, and this is kind of odd, and if you say no, I will understand. I can always take this question out later. But is there that one free piece of advice based on the game market right now that you would give possibly to an outsider looking into the business?
Meaning that they're looking to publish something?
Yeah. Somebody who's not not in publishing right now. If they were thinking about it, what would you tell them?
It will cost twice as much as you think, and it'll take 3 times as long as you think.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing that pops into my mind, just expectations. There's tons of different advice I would give people, but honestly, that's the first one.
Yeah. And free advice.
Free advice. No, but it's just seriously, most of the stuff, anybody who wants to, I'll give them a half an hour of my time for free. Because there's no reason not to. But I guess the other thing is specifically about role-playing game. This is advice that Joe Goodman gave years ago that I think is very prescient. the first decision you need to make is, do you want to be published or do you want to be a publisher?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you publish something, you're a publisher. You have a business. You have to run a business. I.e., if you run a Kickstarter, you're a business person at that point. And so I think some people, if they can come to terms with, who they are and what they want, they may be better off trying to find somebody to publish their thing for them. But the truth is that most people are creatives and they don't want to publish other people's things. So just, be realistic about your expectations. If your expectation is, I just want this thing, I don't want to publish it so that I have it and 200 other people may want it and then I'm done, just be honest with it, yourself.
Yeah.
Because, look at what Sandy Peterson did with Cthulhu Wars, Swan Song. He thought he was going to move to indie work, and this was just the last thing that he was going to do in the game industry in the board game industry and whatnot before he left the U.S. Well, then he ran a $1.4 million Kickstarter. Well, at that point, you have a business.
Yeah.
I guess it would just be about, one, setting expectations for your own goals, and then two, realizing that your expectations of how much it'll cost and how long and how hard it will be are vastly under what reality is.
Well, excellent. So these are pretty much the majority of the questions I had tonight.
Cool.
I do, of course, want to toss out one thing I love to do, and that's ask a shameless plug. If people wanted to track down Gamerati or see what y'all are up to, where do you think they should go?
Gamerati.com.
Gamerati.
Although business-wise, it's Gamerati.biz. So if that's where we put our business stuff. But they can just email me at pretty much anything at Gamerati.com. Answer it. So they could email me at passionnerdy@gamerati.com and I'll get it. I'm a catch-all, so I'll get everything. We're Gamerati everywhere. So YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever your poison is, Facebook, you'll find us there. If you want to see the videos and stuff that we do, your best bet is probably Facebook because we put most of our stuff up there.
Been enjoying it. In fact, I think the most recent video was something from the warehouse that I saw. Was that y'all's video? I think it was somebody working in a warehouse wrapping some stuff up. Yeah,
so that's probably a Game Biz episode. I had this weird idea a year ago that it would be cool to follow like Fred Hicks from Evil Hat Productions around for a day and then make a video, but I never got around to doing it. So I just hired a couple of video guys last year, and their whole job is to follow us around the office and just videotape everything. So when Joey's packing boxes or we're playtesting something or I'm having a call, like with you, for instance, during more normal business hours, there's somebody videotaping it. And we just turn it into videos that we release out so that people can see what it takes to run a business. So Alex and Pat came up to the office to do a summit for Crafty Games. We videotaped it. We went to lunch with Sasquatch Games. We videotaped it. If I go to Paizo's headquarters next week, I'll videotape it, and then we just chop it all up and put it into an episode. So there's some business stuff. There's some humor, mostly us making fun of each other. But yeah, so we have fun with it. My thesis is that you can't recreate it later.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lot easier to document it. You said you've worked in publishing, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever done an interview where somebody asked you a question about what happened back in the day, quote unquote? Wouldn't it have been nice to just be like, I don't know, but I have the video right here. I could show you.
Oh, a million,
right?
A million times. That is so true. So that would be wonderful.
So that's where those kind of spawned from. And we're thinking about doing more. Actually have this. So Joey, my guy that runs the warehouse, he has been designing a game that's affectionately called Project Swarm right now because we don't have a name for it. We did a couple videos of the footage to kind of show the genesis of some of the changes. And I've had this theory that it would be good to do an entire series where you start from scratch, and people are involved in the creation of let's say a role-playing game, right? From the start. And you just document the entire process from the moment you guys brainstorm the initial idea to the moment the books leave the warehouse and go out to customers, and just turn that into a 2-year-long video series. I'm toying with it. Unfortunately, it's expensive to do that, but I think people will get a kick out of it. So I'm kind of considering that, and maybe I'll do something with it. I've been talking with video guys about how much that would cost because I have to pay them. But yeah, it's something I'm considering because I do think that would be interesting. Maybe sometime before the end of the year, I'll figure out how to make that work.
Sounds amazing. Please let us know. We'd love to follow y'all when y'all do.
Cool.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we absolutely love having you on here. We love being able to continue and see what Gamerati are doing and the opportunity y'all have given us. So thank you very much.
Well, I'll just say this, John. If there's anybody you want to talk to in the industry, just let me know. I might know them. So I'd be happy to introduce you to anybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ed.
Thanks, man.
Bye.